Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, Giselle. Just waiting on everyone.
Why every time I do this, I feel like it's the first time I've ever gotten it. Good evening.
Good evening.
We're just waiting on one more for quorum.
Thank you.
Okay, we have quorum.
Excellent. Thank you. I am going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the April 29th, 2021 meeting of Community Board 11 Statement of District Needs and Budget Requests Committee. My name is Jason Villanueva and I am the chair of the committee. This meeting is called to order at 6:34 p.m. tonight. We are joined by the Assistant District Manager, Carly Liaison, who's also, I'm sorry, Carly Wine, who is also our staff liaison. In order to conduct the meeting efficiently, let's observe a few ground rules. Thank you, Carly. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through the Zoom function. If you click the participants icon, the participants panel should appear and you should find the raise hand function there. If you still have a technical difficulty, you may click that chat icon and relate your difficulty to the staff. The chat function should not be used for CB11 business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated out loud on the record during the meeting. Sorry. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have questions or comments about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom and wait to be recognized. So, meeting's called to order.
Okay, I can do the roll call for you, Jason.
Thank you, Carly.
All right. Arroyo?
Here.
Green? Lave?
Here.
Meyer?
Here.
Padilla?
Here.
Santiago?
Present.
Villanueva?
Present.
Woo.
Present.
All right, you have quorum.
Thank you, Carly. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was posted online. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. Adoption of the committee meeting minutes. Unfortunately, I have not had the opportunity as of yet to distribute the minutes for circling all the way back to January. Was having some personal issues. With that said, we'll definitely get the minutes out before the next full board meeting, and we'll summarize and we'll adopt them at our next meeting, which is, I believe, May 13th. Again, as you guys heard all through the full board meeting, we're doing things that just a little bit more formal and more importantly to execute our time more efficiently. With that said, we're starting to put the announcements in the front more, and in my opinion, I think it's great because a lot of the times the public members, aren't at the end of our meetings when we make the announcements. So moving forward, we're going to try to do the announcements before we conduct business. So the district needs and budget committee will meet next on Thursday, May 13th at 6:30 p.m. The New York City Council has also posted the schedule for public hearings on the executive budget for fiscal year 22 on their website calendar. Carly also sent that out with the agenda. So, and if necessary, we could post it. It will also be posted in the minutes. Does anybody have any other announcements? Do we have to? I see Xavier has his hand raised.
Am I recognized, Jason?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. Real quick, it is, we had started about a year ago with the Youth Symposium, which was engaging those members of our community. It was a combined effort of 3 committees. It obviously was tabled due to COVID. We are bringing it back. Our primary focus at this point in time is going to be on middle school age groups, since those are the ones that are easier to kind of help guide in this process. And it'll be also addressing with the issues such as the potential PTSD from the pandemic. We are going to have our first meeting hopefully next week. We're looking around Wednesday. I'm still waiting for a confirmation from majority of members. If anyone would like to participate, please send me an email. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. Seeing no other hands, we'll move right along the rest of our agenda. So presentations, discussions. As some of you have had the opportunity to have received already from the district manager today, specific for the community board, and as well as from Carly, the responses to our requests and where they're at this time from the mayor's office. So, tonight we're going to review the CB11 budget registry, review of the budget summary, review of the city council's public hearing calendar, and then we're going to have a discussion about next steps to that. So we're going to go through them real brief. This is an effort. Again, the meeting's recorded. Again, I think this is great. So that way the public can also see this. I have to make this a little bigger because I'm seeing both screens, so forgive me. Even with glasses.
Do you need me to zoom in? I could do that.
That would be great. Thank you so
How's
much.
that?
That's perfect.
Okay.
So we have a lot of requests, and a lot of the responses are pretty much the same at this point from what we got. So what's this step? That I know that's the probably a thought, and we're going to definitely Q&A at the end of this. So if there are more questions that come up from our committee members, hopefully we'll get them answered today, and if not, more importantly, follow up on it. So we did our budget request. They were reviewed by the administrative agencies. We got those responses, I think, back in February, March. And now OMB, who represents the mayor's office, took into account those responses, the letter to the mayor that we wrote, I believe last month. And, now this is what they consider the executive budget. And so that these responses won't show all the history. That's why we have our budget trackers that we love all our committee members for updating and assisting the staff and making sure we're efficient. But Carly, I like that you did that. That is great to kind of show. If you go through the summary, this also shows some of the people that are responsible. That question seems to constantly come up. We have been, a lot of you have been great in your efforts and engaging with these administrative agencies. So those people may be generic for the entire city, and you were able to find the liaison no different than you see like from the Manhattan Borough President's office or any of the elected officials that can work specifically for our district. So I applaud all of you for that effort and for the board's work to where it's at today. So we're gonna go, like I said, real briefly through it, not too much discussion on it, so that way we can go through the meet. So we got some time for some of the other items on the agenda. So we asked to provide for more housing, special needs, such as testimony. I'm not gonna read out loud the entire request because we've been doing this already since October. With that said, that's the request. Provide more housing for special needs households. Specifically, OMB supports the agency's positions as follows. And back then we probably got a response from HPD that stated that the agency will use its existing resources to accommodate this request. They're not rejecting it, but they're also, they're not just saying that they're doing it. They're going to do it with funding that they already have. And it's, again, this is the advocacy effort. I know a lot of you have called me and said, Jason, what's the next steps? This is great information for us as board members to take back to our committees, and our committee members can start having some conversations with these administrative agencies to start working together to figure out how that funding is going to be used. So that's an example. I'm not going to do it for each one of these because, as you'll see, it's constantly, that response is normal, for lack of a better word. I've seen it so many times in the last 5 years. Provide more housing for extremely low and low income households. This is definitely, I know, a big discussion at land use, and I would expect no different at housing. They're telling you that the administrative agencies, all of them, DHS, HPD, HUD, you name, some of you know them better than me. They're going to use their existing resources to provide this funding in our community. Great. It's up to us to advocate. So same scenario. We could go to the next item, if you don't mind, Carly. Reconstruct or upgrade a park or amenity. Further study, excuse me. Further study by the agency of this request is needed. Therefore, OMB does not take any position. They're basically telling you that the mayor hasn't looked at this item to give us some funding, but there has been conversations at the parks level. I know Carly could probably speak to it more if there's any questions or concerns about it at the end. But there's a lot of advocacy efforts by the Parks Committee to ensure that any funding that they have, that they're using, and more importantly, they're doing the necessary work to acquire the funding, right? And I always say we need to substantiate our claims. So taking the pictures, looking at that's one thing. The next step is them doing an environmental study and an impact study to see if they could get the funding for the project. Yep.
I'll just add that the response to the previous request is a little weird because the mayor announced the $284 million investment to the Esplanade, including the pier, which, we have two requests for the Esplanade and they both have a vague answer. Meanwhile, it actually is funded. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Kind of calls into question how seriously they take this process. they can't give us up-to-date information.
Thank you, Carly. Provide technology upgrade. Remote learning has been created a significant technology need for the schools across East Harlem. So the response by the agency, this is pretty much asking for, funding for the schools. OMB supports the agency request. The request includes more than one proposal. Funding for part is recommended. And that's, again, a conversation that we need to have. A lot of this will be responded to remember, the next step, just for those of us who aren't familiar, in the summer will be our district consultations, where we sit down with the administrative agencies and gauge where they're at and where they're going, and more importantly, how we can work with them to get our requests met, as well as see if there's any needs that we're missing. Sometimes I think we miss that part. So here they're telling you funding is in part, and that's because the Department of Education, from what we've been told, has been giving additional funding. So we'll look more into this. Jason, I don't know if you have any specific items. I know you guys are meeting with DOE, DYCD. Carly told me briefly about it for the schools.
No comment.
Thank you. So
I'm sorry. Is it okay if I just add?
Yeah,
this is another instance.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, in our call earlier, Jason, we've been having the community education councils. I hope that's what CEC stands for. Otherwise, sorry. But they've been attending our youth and education meetings regularly, and throughout the last few months, the superintendent of the school for District 4 and the CEC both reported that their technology needs were met as far as numbers of tablets. I'm not so sure about laptops and iPads. And they did make a note that it doesn't speak to those that do wind up breaking in the students' possession, but they have been keeping us updated on their needs, on their technology needs.
Thank you, Carly. So the next item is to provide a new expansion to a building in our park. OMB supports. This project is currently in design. And this is pretty much a major discussion we've had about at the Parks Committee. Jessica's definitely elaborated at length about it. And I know that there's conversations of how to name the park. One of the things I saw specifically in this item was asking for, I guess, I assume like a playground within the area, but this is something that would be further discussed, that could be discussed at the district meetings, district consultations. I don't know if you have anything else to that, Carly.
Yeah, all these items, I do have something else. So Parks and EDC came to present this project to us. It is in design. They do not currently have funding for a comfort station, but they are making room for it for future funding. If you're interested in seeing the design, that is available in the shared board member drive. It also is available on our website calendar for the meeting date that they came and presented. And I believe it might have been March. But if you are interested, just feel free to reach out whether you're a committee member or if you're a public attendee.
Thank you, Carly. And this will be the standard response for all MTA items. This is something that is going to be looked at with the Public Safety Committee. But again, it seems that the Department of Transportation and MTA are extremely responsive. With that said, this is the request: repair, upgrade a subway station and other infrastructure site. They're asking to secure the funding for phase 2 of the 2nd Avenue subway. I personally don't know of the funding not being there, but with that said, this is something for committee that can look at with district consultations to have further discussion with the administrative agency. So If you'd like, Carl, unless you have something to, we can move to the next item as well. Provide a new or upgrade existing sanitation garages or other sanitation infrastructure. Build a permanent state-of-the-art dual district sanitation garage to service Manhattan Community Districts 10 and 11. Due to fiscal constraints, the availability of funding is uncertain. This is something, again, that the committee probably should have looked at already last month. We'll look at against the letter for some advocacy. I don't hear a public outcry that the garbage isn't being picked up in the district as much as I do for some other items. But with that said, that's if that does exist, please bring it to public safety's attention, and they could further advocate for this. And we'll talk about how that's going to happen, right? Because when I say further advocate, they can advocate for more funding come May during the city council hearings, as well as during the conversations with district consultations over the summer. So improve accessibility for transit infrastructure, providing elevators, accessible escalators, etc. This is just to make the public I shouldn't say just to, but this is a request for the public transportation stations in our district to be more accessible for people with disabilities and or mobile impairment. Again, this is a standard response from MTA and or the New York Transit Authority. So I'll look at this further with Jose, and if there isn't anything, Carly, further, we can move further. We can move on. Provide a new expansion to a building in or park. It is recommended that this request be brought to your attention, the elected officials. I've been waiting for this response. We're going to bundle all of these items up that say elected officials. We're going to put them all in one letterhead, and we're going to send it to our elected officials. We've done that in the past in a few different ways, resolutions, a letter, but just want you all to have that in mind, that if there's an item there that says we need to advocate further, then I need not tell you, we've taken a position by submitting our documents and our requests. So now we'll definitely advocate further to our elected officials. So the same to be said for the next request: reconstruct or upgrade a park, fund the replacement of 107th Street Pier. Again, Carly brought it up. It's already understood that project's funded. I don't disagree that there could be semantics and or technicalities where, yeah, we funded the project, but they funded, the southeast portion of the block and not the northwest. Again, that's a lot of the work that's going to happen with the committee. And we're going to definitely continue to push to advocate for that funding. Next item. Evaluate a public location or property for green infrastructure, rain gardens. The East River Esplanade serves as a natural, but at this time, multiple segments along these are slated for repairs. The community board should contact the responsible agency regarding this request. I'm going to get into some of these responses. I need to understand what OMB means by that. We did that by doing this, but next item, Carl. I don't want to spend 3 minutes of you guys hearing about my opinions of the hypocrisy. Renovate interior building component. Again, another infrastructure request upgrade for our existing schools. Is unable to prioritize funding for this project requested at this time. It's definitely something that Youth and Education should have a discussion with DOE to understand if this is happening or if it isn't. And then, I'll speak to the chair to see if there's anything that they want to look towards. This would be an item that I would think that come in May, if there's an issue and the kids don't have proper air circulation or power for the air circulation of their systems, then they need more funding for the school. Next item is create a new or renovate or upgrade an existing public library. Funding, this is pretty much that whole conversation about the library being closed down on 125th Street. This project was funded in the prior fiscal year and the construction contract has been let. I don't know what that means, but it probably means NTP, which means usually that they've they've issued a contract for the construction, so the work is in progression. We can move on to the next item. That would be something I would look at, is that the mayor's has, if it becomes more interesting when we start cross-analyzing these responses with the responses you already received from the administrative agency. And if you see a challenge where, in this example, that the administrative agency says, oh, the funding doesn't exist, and this is opposing that response, then we should have a conversation to figure out how to better advocate. Upgrade the bathrooms at the Lexington Academy located at 131 East. They're unable to prioritize funding for this project request at this year. I mean, to Department of Education, that's another youth and education item. I'll look at that. Again, I didn't see a lot of big items come out in the response with DOE, but we'll cross collaborate and see if there's any issues. Available funds are insufficient for this project. We recommend this project be brought to their attention. Again, any items with the elected officials, we're going to bundle them up, and we'll send out notice to our elected officials about the projects that we're interested in happening. This is to create a new or renovate and upgrade existing public library, Aguilar Library, and they're asking, will we continue to maintain space? This is, again, because the 125th Street Library is going to be down. They're asking them to use this library. Since this library is going to be used, then they want the accessibility ramp to be repaired. Again, that's something that economic development can further advocate for, and we'll get into that as we push for the district consultations for the summer. Next item, enhance park safety through design interventions. An example given, better lighting. Funding should be allocated to install more lighting inside Marcus Garvey Park to increase the park safety. OMB supports park will discuss this request with the Department of Transportation, which is responsible for lighting in the parks as well as the streets. That's great information. I know there's always that conversation of who's responsible for closing the parks, opening the parks, lighting the parks, maintaining them. So they're telling you who's responsible there. So maybe next time parks will have to work with public safety, and that request will go to the Department of Transportation in lieu of parks. Those are the type of items you want to catch. And again, I'm speaking to the liaisons, generically, regardless of what committee you represent, because sometimes these items come like this and they gave you your answer, and then next year we'll resubmit it incorrectly and we'll get the same response. So the next item, reconstruction or upgrade a park of an amenity. With the rehabilitation of the fire watchtower, Marcus Parley, funding must not be allocated for paths. Will cost about, it is recommended this request. Again, another elected official item. I'll have conversations with the parks chair, see, this items came up, we brought it up, and see where our elected officials are at with it. This is a request about providing fixing street lighting. Then the agency will try to accommodate this issue with existing resources. Whenever you see existing resources, I'm gonna just preach this real quick. Think district consultation. Use this as an item where you got the agency and the mayor now co-signing the agency's response that they're gonna use their existing funding. You advocated for it. They said they were gonna use it. So, actually, the district consultation, when's your next 20 lighting projects coming up for our district? And again, I'm just to any of one of our committees. Next item, reconstruct or upgrade a park and amenity. Again, another park item. Replace the synthetic turf for the playground using natural materials. So another elected official item, as I stated before, we'll wrap up all the elected official items requests and send them out for comment. And if it's been a long-standing issue, which some of these items I believe are more new for the district this year. With that said, if it's a long-standing issue, then it's something that we need to advocate for next month. So upgrade the Peterman, if I pronounced that wrong, forgive me, playground to include a comfort station and new state-of-the-art playground. Department of Parks, it is recommended this request, another elected officials item. So we'll look at that with the Parks Committee for next month, and we'll definitely get back to the committee and the public if there's any concerns. And I think I'm going to do that for all parks because I do remember there's a few items about schools and parks. So the item's the same for the next request. Get further study by the agent. This is needed, therefore, and B does not. So this is the request for parks. Funding should be allocated to renovate the back fence of the Harlem Art Park. So that's just another item that they need to converse with the local administrative agency and figure out, what's the status. And if not, then they should advocate for it next month to see if we can get more funding. This is another park in the community, New York City Parks and Sponsorship. So with that said, all the items, elected officials, we're going to wrap up together. You can keep going, Carly. Because everyone has this document. What I'm really trying to do is show you like how we review it. And when I say you, I'm talking to the public, how we review the document, we go through it, we see the request, we review the response, and then we make a determination of what's our next course of action. It's not going to necessarily happen here tonight, but we're reviewing the document. Other capital budget requests for the fire department, provide additional for fire safety education unit to service East Harlem. So OMB supports the FDNY Foundation provides funds to assist the department in meeting these needs. So that's an item where, district consultation. Priority number 25, the request for parks funding should be to replace copper pipes and valves for the water system. So further study needs to happen. Just a recommendation, they should look at DEP for that. Whenever you start dealing with pipes in the streets, the Department of Environmental Protection gets involved as well. So number 26 of the capital budget request, Department of Health, mental hygiene, increased personnel for needle pickup on 107th, 11th, and 125th Streets. Needle pickup also must occur near Clanton Houses, Marcus Garvey Park, and Ronald McNair Park. This item is not eligible for capital funding as an expense budget funding request. Further study by the agency of this request. We need to look at this request from the response. We've had this request on our, I'm going to red flag this for us as a committee. We have had the needle request in the past, and I just want to see what that response was in comparison to this one and see where we're at. I know it's still an issue, and if not, it's grown over the last year with the complaints that the board office has been getting. So the semantics of it being put in as capital and it should have been expense, if it went to the right agency, then that's an accounting item. They can make that determination, and then let's have a conversation of how to figure out how to fund it. Again, forgive my rant, but that shouldn't stop them from not funding the pickups in our district. Now we're going to go into expenses. This is a little bit more, but hopefully we'll again, if there are items that have the repetitive response, pretty much the answer I've given in the previous scenario will more than likely apply for process. The COVID-19 pandemic has heightened the need to meaningfully engage our youth and support working parents, increase the amount of after-school programs. OMB supports the agency's position as follows. There are a variety of I'm not reading it word for word, forgive me. Additional programs are contingent upon available funding and will be distributed in the RFP process. Again, this is something for the Youth and Education Committee. I know, again, you guys are, you already have a science. You're going to meet with BYCD, and you have another opportunity over the summer for district consultation to see how that funding is allocated. But I do know there's a lot of fundings going around for pre-K and 3K, and it'd probably be a little bit more interesting how it's getting to our district is probably the question. So create or promote programs to destigmatize mental health needs and encourage treatment. Community 11 ranks in the first for psychiatric hospitals, and we go into why programs should, the ask was programs should annually assess and evaluate to provide assistance with jobs, housing, education, medical, any other needs that this vulnerable population may have. Funds a variety of services. Yeah, we will review and assess the request, which would be contingent upon available resources. So it's real simple, right? We gave a very vague request. They gave us a very vague response. If there's a specific need, I'm assuming this came out of Human Services is looking towards, then again, we can have that conversation in district consultation and look maybe to rewrite the request from the next fiscal cycle. So there's an example, right? I said May. So if you're a committee member who's on Human Services, and right now we talked last month, and I know I wasn't at full board. Forgive me, I wasn't feeling too well. With that said, but I do know I've directed that we should be talking already about next year's requests. So this is a scenario where maybe we want to hone in on a specific issue because we have more data. Like when we make these requests, we're just throwing out a net, especially if it's an initial request. Now we can start fine-tuning and honing in on the specific issue and make sure we allocate the funding that's required for our district. I know there was a very robust conversation about this issue at full board. So, just as it was brought up by some of our members that are on this committee, I'll further say get involved. Look how this funding is being used in the district, see how it could be properly allocated. And again, that's my activist advocate hat speaking to you. Get a little further involved and see how we can assist in ensuring that this funding is going and is being used properly as being requested. Next item, provider expand occupational skills training programs. Due to the rising unemployment among the community, support is needed to motivate and mobilize job seekers. This is an all effort to stimulate the East Harlem workforce. Provide funding for more workforce development programs. The agency will try to accommodate this issue with existing resources. So that's a request. If I'm on that committee, that for district consultation to see how they'll use their existing resources. Other expense budgets for MOCJ. I'm assuming that's criminal justice, the mayor's office, but I could be wrong. No, yeah, it is. Mayor's office. Provide funding for an expansion of the mayor's action plan for neighborhood safety to cover all nights of developments. Further investigation is required. I don't know I don't recall whom or what committee this request came from. But if there's a question, we could discuss it at the end of the committee, at the end.
It came from public safety.
Okay. So further investigation is required. Contact the agency. I'm really interested in OB making those types of statements. If we did this, then it means we've already contacted the agency. But that's my opinion. Next item, other community board facilities and staff requests. Provide funding for baseline increase. The personal service OTS, yes, I love this request. In fiscal year, the community board's budget is maintained. That does not mean that they increased it. But that's something that we, us as well as executives should look at. I like that one. Thank you, Colin. Item number 6, provide, expand, or some of you SYEP, restore full funding. Further study for the agency of this request is needed. Therefore, OMB does not take up any position. We'll look at the previous answer from DYCD. I do know that there was an increase. I do not know exactly how much, but again, Jason, if there's nothing to speak to it, we could talk about it towards the end if anybody's interested. Number 7, expand programs for housing inspections to correct code violations. The agency will try to accommodate the issue. Thank you, Colin. Yeah, if you catch that, if they're going to use existing funding, you got to require, you could wait to the district consultation, which is the legal process of them they're having to speak to us. And sometimes they don't. in the summer, or, the chair could use this information now and start reaching out to them. The concerns when they say there is no funding or they don't have the funding, then that's something that I would tell any of you to write down for yourself as a liaison and say, this is an alarm. In this, just an alarm, just a flag. This is a flag, and you want to know if the committee wants to advocate further for it, right? Come May. So that's pretty much what the exercise is for that we're doing. The next item, expand programs for housing inspections to the same. Oh, I'm sorry, I read it again. Next item would be 8. Provide expand occupational skills training program. The agency will try to accommodate this issue with existing resources. I guess we went in one part of the same request in capital. We also provided an expense. So, that's something that you can wait for district consultation, or the committee can speak to the administrative agency now. And if there is a concern that the agency needs more funding, then that should be flagged for us to consider for the May advocacy efforts to City Council. Assign more teaching staff. COVID-19 has drastic. Again, I apologize. The request is we need more staff because of COVID-19 in our schools. Supports the agency's principals have direct control over their respective school-based staffing needs and will make their decisions accordingly. Our request was vague. It's, for example, PS 96 on the corner of 103rd and Lexington needed lost, has 100 students to one teacher. We have to find those types of scenarios and have some conversation. So, that's my opinion with it. I do not know if with the increased funding that was provided to DOE, if the challenges will exist next year. I'll tell you this much. I received an email from the Department of Education where they have a pot where they're giving approximately $10 million to the school, to each school for next year. So, and that was sent to me in writing from the Department of Education. So, we'll see if with that said, if we could move to the next item. Enhance home care services. Funding is needed to expand services to our multicultural community of low income and below federal poverty level seniors. OMB supports the agency's position. More information is needed from the community boards, therefore making a funding decision. Should contact the agency. With that said, when they say we'll contact, we should contact them for the Department of Funding for BFTA for over our district consultations. But from whatever committee that came out of it, there's concerns about funding for our senior citizens, and should look into possibly advocating next month in May. Next item, expand code enforcement. Provide more funding for tenant harassment units. The agency will try to accommodate with existing resources. Again, district consultations to have that conversation. Expand programs for housing inspections to correct code. Increase funding for specialized enforcement programs such as an internal enforcement program. So the Department of the agency will try to accommodate this issue with existing resources. So you do, again, when you see that, you just want to compare it to the responses you got from the administrative agency, which again, when we put all this on the tracker that you all work on, you'll see all your requests and you'll see if there's any contradiction to it. The impacts of COVID-19 remote learning disproportionately felt. Funding should be allocated to enhance ESL services during this time of hybrid remote learning. There are a variety of agency funded programs in the district for this target population. So they're saying that the funds are there, it exists, and organizations are encouraged to apply. So that's a great response, I think, for the youth committee. But, look at it, see if there's any further concern. And again, if you want to know that process, you have every right to bring it up beforehand, but you have further right at district consultation. This is again about bringing more funding, they're basically telling you, the principals are given a budget, the principals administer the budget, they execute the budget. So maybe some of the advocacy that's coming out of here has to happen at the school level. And if the principals are saying they ain't got the money, then that's something that needs to be used to justify the position of what was stated here. But again, that's not looking at the response that the administrative agency possibly stated they would use existing resources. So the next item, 15, the agency will try to accommodate with existing resources, and this is to assist with on-site business compliance and city regulations. And of course, the agency is right there, the DSS, SPS. So if there's any issues, speak to SPS, and again, you have the opportunity at district consultations. Provide funding to purchase additional service vans and additional computers, tablets, and supporting supplies which may aid residents with annual online recertifications. When they say that further study is required, then I think that there should be a further conversation, a district consultation. But if the need is imminent, please do not hesitate to bring that up at housing, so that way you guys can present something in May. Expand bus, and in May we're going to talk about that. That's the third item in the agenda. It just goes back to the city council's hearings on the budget. So here your infamous response from New York Transit Authority. The most inconsistent bus lines. Again, we asked for more bus lines and to improve them. So New York City has considered changing these routes to originate north of the 159th Street Bridge. So I know this issue has been, I think this is the second year it's been on our request. I don't know how deep the committee got with it, but there should be a conversation about understanding that standard response from the Transit Authority. Number 18, other park programming requests, budget cuts in parks due to COVID. Sorry, it froze. Need to be cleaned and maintained more frequently. Garbage is littered throughout parks and creates an unpleasant experience. The agency recommends funding the expense in fiscal year. By this time, the availability of funds is uncertain. So that's something for the community to advocate for. That's advocacy right there. That's screaming advocacy. So I know we have the greatest advocacy team in the world at parks, but with that said, this is something that might even need to get further looked at with district consultations. So advocacy is definitely a big piece of this. The next item, 19, provide, expand, and enhance preventive services and community-based alternatives for youth. The youth in East Harlem are especially vulnerable to crime and violence. Funding should be allocated to enhance services that both prevent youth violence and provide an alternative to incarceration. This service is not under the agency's jurisdiction. DYCD doesn't handle ATCs. So it's something, just again, the committee should look at this, see what agency does handle this situation. It may have been responded to from the administrative agency from last, it was in March we got the responses, right, Carly, or February, I tend to forget across the years. The last time we got the responses from the admin agencies, and just see if there's any conflict with it, so that we can properly submit this for next year. Next item, animal pest control requests, including reducing rats and mosquito populations. Proactive measures to mitigate, this is the rat request. The funding for this request cannot be determined at this time. It went to the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Okay. That might be the challenge. I don't know. I know this item for years has been, for years since I've been a board member. It finds its way in different places. We got to look at the history of the submission and see how we can get it properly submitted. And if there is a proper submission, then where's the money for people to handle the pest control in our public domain? I think a lot of in the private sector, when you own your own house, you're responsible. Your landlords, they're responsible. A lot of this is challenging in these public owned properties, right? And I'm speaking specifically to night shift. Are the supers doing what they're supposed to do for the buildings? That's not, I don't know. So we can move to the next item. I do think that it's a further discussion for advocacy. I'll tell you, with housing. 21, extend library hours, expand and enhance library programs. The funding for this request cannot be determined at this time. Social 19, community requires expansion. And see, when I'm gonna highlight these items that say the funding for this request cannot be determined. And one of my questions as chair for the SDN is, how do we determine? Are we not being specific enough? I think right here they gave a lot of specificity. I can see some of the other items. I can agree with that general response, but others not necessarily so. So some of these I think should be looked at by us, and all of them should be looked at. But anyone that are flagged for you that you were specific, you get asked for the time, you told them the service. How do we make this determination? Who do we need to speak to? Who do we need to advocate with? Increase case management capacity, provide funding for making more case versus further study for the agency, therefore OMB does not. So we have to look into this. I'm assuming that came out of human services. So we'll definitely start isolating some of these items that have the further study or the funding can't be determined at this time. Allocate funds for outreach services to homebound older adults and for programs that allow the elderly to age in place. Provide funding to ensure faster service for senior transitioning from hospital rehab to home. Further study by the agency of this request is needed. Therefore, like in this case, I would say, give me a senior citizen home that is complaining about it. That's Jason. Like if I was on the committee, that's a conversation to have. Let's get it. And this is why I say we have to have our requests supported by our local community-based organizations, right? Because if they're very open-ended, then that's the response. And we want to drive home on some of these items, especially for next year. So that's agenda planning for your fiscal 2023 draft, right? If you got that kind of response, now let's get creative on how to resubmit the request while we're doing all the advocacy efforts that we're really looking forward to over the next 3 months. Provide, expand, or enhance the out-of-school youth program for job training and employment services. They're substantiating the requests, and funding should be allocated to expand the out-of-school youth program for job training and employment services to help mitigate the impacts of low educational attainment and help individuals without a degree find jobs. The approval of this request depends on sufficient federal or state funds. Again, definitely a district consultation item, but have that conversation when DYCD presents a youth education. Do they see that funding coming down the pipeline? With all the commitments that have been made between the president and our governor and now mayor. So we want to ensure that that's there. So if it needs to be resubmitted anyway for next year. The next item, 25, I think, or that's it. Are we done?
It's definitely not it.
Sorry, guys. I'm all about time management. So support local CBO's efforts. Again, this is for us, asking more funding for us. Continue maintenance for preservation of authentic historical land, which has programs. Funding the Avenue NYC program should continue for existing placemaking and tourism efforts. SBS is available for technical assistance, a sponsor group to apply. So they provide the information. That's great. Definitely district consultation. I'd even follow up as soon as possible with the chair of that committee and see how we could get that effort to the hands of our community members. Provide more information on services related to STIs. I think that meant these. HIV, AIDS, and family planning. East Harlem residents are more sex education should be included in access to HIV. Sex education services should be provided, especially, I don't disagree with that. Yeah. The funding for this request cannot be determined at this time. And I just think it's because we're being vague. There seems the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, they're a very big agency. So I think if we're very specific, and maybe we need to analyze that organization a little bit more. They seem to be on the hit list for the board because of everything that's going on anyway with the treatment centers in the district. So we should get them down, get them at the board and bring them to committees and start having conversation, not only about our concerns with the quality of life that people are complaining about, but more I'm concerned about the people that are suffering in the streets. And my other concern is, where's this funding going for the programs that are servicing? So, it's more advocacy, but that's gonna hat that one off there. Enhance homes care services, provide funding to expand hours of home care, provide it to ensure fewer rehospitalizations. So further study, therefore, will be, and again, whenever I see the further study to assist the agency, the argument comes from a CBO, right? And a community-based organization doesn't just need to be, an advocacy group. It can be, a business. It can be an educational institution. It could be, a slew of services. If they're a business and they operate in our district, we should coordinate with them so we can collect data to deal with these challenges. Provide more funds for teaching resources, such as classroom materials, provide more PPE, and sanitizer. This request has already been filed. Next. That's great. That's a great answer. And I can't disagree. My wife's a teacher. They give her all the PPE stuff. Provide more on street trash cans. Funding more allocated to provide more. I agree. I mean, I should say, I so agree. Our community doesn't have trash cans anywhere. I walk blocks with garbage in my pocket. Due to fiscal availability of funds is uncertain. It's definitely something that my opinion, should be talked about in May. Next item, provide more same kind of similar requests. I can't. Was restored. So I don't know if the committee should wait till to clarify that issue, since garbage seems to be a big concern of the community. But and I shouldn't say garbage collection, it's littering. That's a bigger concern of the community than the garbage collecting. Sanitation knows where to put our garbage that we leave in the street Mondays, Tuesday, but the garbage that's just thrown on the streets is because there ain't no litter baskets. Never see the litter basket. Well, blocks, traffic or parking studies. The agency will try to accommodate this issue with existing resources. Excessive has created safety problems for key intersections. Yeah. So, with the goal of improving pedestrian safety and safety. Okay. So they're probably going to ask for a traffic study to justify that request. But the Department of Transportation, if then their traffic study shows they don't need to do it, then that's, but the study versus the facts are always could be in disagreement because of an incident. So advocacy is my point. Bring that to district consultations, definitely. Increase community board training, include on core land use process and practices, provide funding for digital Europe trainings, as well as outreach to promote the new trainings in East Harlem. The agency will try to accommodate this issue within existing resources. Yeah, because I think we were told late after the responses that they provide that training. So we're going to look to get that going. I'll have a conversation with the chair, our new chair, Elsie, for land use, and Andrew, who's on our committee, to see how this effort can happen. Number 33, other park programming requests. Green Thumb needs additional funding to properly execute its oversight role and ensure community gardens are open to the public. The agency recommends funding this expense is fiscal year, but at this time, the availability of funds is uncertain. So I like that response when they say that availability is uncertain. That to me is a definite red flag or a flag for a liaison that's on the committee to say, hey, do we want to advocate for this in May? That's why I say it like that. Just the terminology there tells me, all right, Well, we want to make sure you're certain. We need it. If that's that issue. Again, a lot of these items have been given, not taken, or again, or have been responded as opposed to dismissed. So, we just need to do the follow-up and the follow-through. So the next item is they're going to use existing resources. This is Department of Health. For the homelessness and the substance abuse issues. I mean, we're doing our part. We're advocating, requesting the funding for our district. We need to see how this funding's going there. And like I said, it's a hot topic. Last year, you guys were involved. It was youth and making sure kids have money to work. This year, our concern is the Department of Health. It's a big issue. It's been brought, I know it held the community meetings hostage, probably like back to back in the last 2 months. Support non-for-profit cultural organizations. Department of Cultural Affairs should provide seed funding for creation of arts, cultural services in collaboration. Where's the ask? We must continue funding the 11, the art and culture of the East Harlem. It is recommended that this request be brought to the attention, and we will. Next, sorry. Those that may miss got on again. I'm not watching the attendance, but with that said, like any items that say they have to go to our elected officials, we're going to wrap them up. And when I say wrap them up, we're going to itemize each of them, separate them from this list, and send a notice out to our elected officials and try to get a formal response. Further studies required by this agency is needed. And this is for item number 36, expand programs for certain industries, fashion, film, events, and food. So yeah, that's definitely a conversation to have at district consultation. When I see the word studies, and again, if there's a major issue or concern that's being brought by our constituents, then we should have that entity can be brought to the table before then. Provide better park maintenance. There are 2 gardeners servicing, so we need more gardeners. We need additional bird to service East Harlem parks. And here's another, funds are uncertain. So maybe Parks wants to take a few of these items, since it seems like all of them have that response, and bundle them up for a grand response. And when I say grand response, just a testimony or response for City Council next month, to make sure that the Department of Parks has money for our district. Number 38. Well, there is no 38. Oh, man. I got this. Improve subway stations and train cleanliness, safety, and maintenance. Same MTA's generic response. We're asking for our train stations to be cleaner. So and our response was specific to, I guess we didn't say which train stations on the streets, but with that said, their response was generic. Provide funding to expand the community parks initiative. And the response is funds are insufficient for this project. We recommend, and we will. We're going to send all these items that are for our elected officials out to them. And with that said, the next item, number 40, provide, expand, or enhance funding for childcare and Head Start programs. This has to be the request for 3K pre-K. The DOE has responded to this request in past fiscal years. Please refer to provided responses. So I'd look at the response we got from DOE back in March or February. I can't seem to remember. And with that said, if they said they funded it, then great. Where? When I was on that committee, I always had the attitude with DOE, like we should have a whole list. Like the board should have a list. So then the board can give them, so then that way when a mother comes to the office, the board can give the list to the mother, right? Where all these places exist in our community. Due to the extraordinary COVID-19, ensure accessibility, and this has to go back to this phase 2 interest of wall standing. As far as the collaboration to protect the interests of all standing roads, to ensure customer accessibility to all places. Yeah, well, This agency will try to accommodate this for issue with existing resources. So, yeah, almost thought it was done again. I'm gonna push it. Provide funding to expanded in-home services for elderly hours of home care. Further studies required, therefore, OMB does not take any position. Definitely something for conversations at district consultations. Enhance home care services, provide funding to hire more Spanish-speaking home care workers. Further studies required. Provide additional funding to continue FDNY's Get Alarm program, $1 million for $63,000 to be installed, or given when approval of this request is contingent upon a higher funding budget through elected officials funding. Next item, 45. Additional New York City forestry staff should be hired to maintain the street trees. Funding should also be directed to Trees New York, the agency, but at this time, the availability of funds is uncertain. Next. That just again goes back to the generic response. If they're uncertain, it's something for the committee to look at. Do they want to advocate further come in May? 46, excuse me, increase vacant lot cleaning. East Harlem has multiple vacant lots pending development that have become illegal. Funding should be allocated to increase vacant. Due to fiscal constraint of funds is uncertain. Excuse me. Next item, plant new trees. In order to help mitigate the impact of climate change, East Harlem needs to more trees to absorb carbon and release oxygen. Yeah, the agency would try to accommodate this issue with existing resources. Maybe the park committee should, grid the district and give them the locations of where possible trees could be planted. Maybe that'll help the department. Conduct traffic or parking studies. Provide funding to study the feasibility of establishing a residential parking permit program in East Harlem. Further study by the agency of this request is needed. Next. I can't see it. Provide funding to hire an assistant director for the Office of Tenant Advocate. This request has already been fulfilled or funded. Sorry. That's it. That was easy.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm gonna give you guys a 2-minute break. I know we don't do that. I think you should take like a 2-minute break. Any questions or concerns? Then, let's talk about it a little bit before we get to the next item. 2-minute break first.
We have a hand raised by Xavier.
You have the floor.
Thank you for running through the register. So one thing I did want to note, and this is a very nuanced aspect about city budgeting, things that would typically be qualified as a capital expense, such as a replacement or repair, can oftentimes get recategorized in certain agencies, such as NYCHA, for example. The repointing of a building or replacement of siding is actually considered an expense, and that is an area where NYCHA is in desperate need of funding. Case in point with Carver Houses on 106th, I think it's 60 East 106th. They've had scaffolding up for well over a year and aren't slated to have funding until 2024 for repointing and replacement of bricks. And in the current state of affairs, it's causing safety issues because it blocks the camera system. So these are things that we should be aware of, that when we're making requests, that sometimes certain agencies will allocate either when we've been educated on their traditional description of capital versus expense. There are some nuances depending on the city agencies. So it's something to keep in mind as we go through, as we ask for particular questions and why things aren't getting funded or being deferred.
Thank you, Xavier. So did anybody else have any questions or concerns relative to what? In particular to the responses that were given by the not I should say by the mayor's office, the OMB, Office for Mayor Budget.
Giselle has her hand raised.
Yes, Giselle.
So my question is, good evening, everyone. My question is, the district consultation is what exactly?
So the district consultations happen over the summer where our staff with the chair and possibly the chair of the committee meets with the administrative agency to specifically discuss our budget requests, right? And not only for what's been responded to in this process as of today, but also what it's going to have, also to discuss their funding initiatives or directions for the next year.
And
So
so
the-
if they don't show up, what, if that agency does not show up, that's, I mean, we would know where to go from there. I mean, we will continue to advocate, but like, is it mandatory for them to show up, or just is it something that they don't?
I mean, I can't speak to the legality of it. I know it's a part of the process. They should show up. It has happened where they have not shown up. But what I could tell you as a member of this body is I focus on those that do show up, and build the relationships with those that do show up to hopefully look at to why the one that didn't show up. And sometimes you'll find out it's just a confusion, a little bit of miscommunication. We found out, I think there was, even with the Department of Education, we would want to meet with them over the summer, and that's when they take their breaks. So when I was in the committee at Youth and Education, we ended up getting the person from budget. I can't remember her name, and she said, "Yeah, I'm off those months."
And
so
then
she came in February. So it's more about, that's why I always use the word community engagement. And you guys have helped me to come up with a term for it, because you just want to keep building that bridge with them. And my point is, you don't have to wait for district consultation for the committee to start consulting with that administrative agency.
Okay.
But with that said, over the summer, usually July or August, at the discretion of the district manager, he sets up with the office, sets up the district consultations and go through these items. Do you want to talk a little bit about it, Carly?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so there are two levels of consultations that the community board has an opportunity to collaborate with agencies. And one of them is the district level consultation, as you are asking about, and then we have the borough budget consultations. So it's not legal. It's not illegal for agency to miss a district budget consultation. The city charter does mandate that we have our district budget consultations with specific agencies. I was looking into the city charter recently, which is why I know this. It requires the agencies that provides services to meet with us. So the reason why certain agencies don't regularly meet with us is because they're not one of the agencies that provides specific services. I'm not explaining this well, but I will follow up with you and send you a description. But that's all to say that if we don't have, so we're certainly going to try to meet with all the city agencies. If for whatever reason we're unable to meet with them, one, we're able to follow through. We're able to follow up with them by email. Two, we're able to follow up with them at the borough budget consultations.
Okay, and then also, Jason, when you say our requests have to be backed up by our community-based organizations, in terms of like our requests and how we, and the little paragraph that follows below the request, what do you mean? Like, let's say, for example, if I'm going to SBS, my request pretty much has to be backed up. Like the need for my request has to be backed up by the community-based organizations that attend our Echo Dev meetings, like Union Settlement and Uptown Grand Central. Like, is that what you mean?
So when we submit these requests, we have an opportunity while submitting the request to substantiate the claim. We're making a request for funding because there's a need, a district need, right? And and how that need is brought to the attention of the committee shouldn't, and this is something I've been having a discussion just about process for the board, shouldn't just necessarily be outlandish, right? It should be vetted. It should be understood. It's no different than when we present resolutions, right? If where the resolution isn't ready, it shouldn't, as a chair, it shouldn't be presented to you board members. It should be vetted, right? And you all know that because I'm very adamant about it being vetted in this process in our committee. So when the same is to be said when you make a request, and if you're making a request and it's very open-ended, you're going to get an open-ended response from the administrative agency. So it assists to give some back, and what that backup could be, it could be testimony, it could be a public outcry. That's something that we can work on together to figure out how to define what that backup is. But I could tell you that when we go to input that request that Carly just showed, it doesn't just populate an OMB system. If not, probably Carly herself, the one who does it, has to input that request into OMB system. And when there's a place that allows us to upload supporting documentation to substantiate that request. This board has not done that since I've been a member. How that's done, I'll use a simpler scenario. You say there's a rat infestation, there's a rat problem, take a picture of rats hanging out on the street in New York City. Not that they run and they go into the subway, or one rat, you see one, and then they run into, or one rat comes out of the garbage and then they run into that's my opinion because I'm a New Yorker, I've seen rats my whole life. But you got like 4 or 5 rats chilling, you have an infestation in there. It's like you go into this area no matter what. You got proof. Maybe you provide a little video. Today we have the smartphone. With you, I would assume, because you're talking economic development, if you're asking for additional funding for a program and SBS is telling you that we have funding for the program, you don't need to ask for additional funding. Unless the community-based organization that's coming to you is saying, hey, I'm asking SBS for this funding and I can't get it. Then I would tell you, okay, advocate for that community-based organization. What I'm trying to do is get away from submitting unwarranted requests. That's not something that's going to happen today. It's a process, and that's as long as I'm chair. I mean, that's God's will. For how long as all chairs will, right? So with that said, it's an effort. We haven't done it yet. So I just said it as an item because if you look at a lot of the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene's requests, because our responses, and I know they're coming from somewhere. So let me give you one last example. The schools is probably the easiest one. They use one there that said the school needs more power. And then they're telling you, well, the principal gets a budget to use the money for it. The principal doesn't have enough money, then the principal and or parent teachers association for that school can advocate to youth and education committee, probably ask for a letter of support. When we provide letters of support, we ask for backup. When we do resolutions, we ask for backup. That's backup to these requests. And I hope I simplified it.
Yes. And then my last question is, when it comes to the New York City Public Library requests, right? We know for sure that the 125th was funded, and that's a project that they hope to begin very soon. The Aguilar response was, like Carly was saying with the other request, that it was just not, it was incorrect, because that also has been funded, but I believe it was funded through a private it was private funding. It wasn't city funding. So then now that response from that agency in a way is incorrect. So do we still leave it there, or do we correct them? Or
No. Then the request is dead. If the request has been, let's get that off the bat. Yeah. If it's been funded and the project's a go, your committee should be, this is something Jason's been advocating for years. We used to have them. Some of you were part of the board. We used to have what was called project trackers. And then we changed it to these budget trackers, and the budget trackers were supposed to, and here's the point. The point is, if the project's been funded, the committee should just be tracking it with the agency. Hey, everything's good, you're going great, and it should be removed from our list for next year.
okay.
That's an approval. You're not still advocating for it. Because what I would like to do is start clearing the board and focusing on truly what might be the dire needs that are in our district that maybe none of us are aware of. Because we're dealing with either our own interests with our own advocacy efforts, or we're dealing with the interest of other members and their advocacy efforts. But again, the whole goes to hear it from the public. Anybody, any more? That was it? Good questions, so thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I think we'll definitely be having a lot more conversations over the course of a few days. I love Carly sent in an agenda of good points for questions for all of you to think about. I'm going to read them out loud. It's like I told her earlier, I thought they were awesome. Right. And should CB11 provide testimony on the executive budget? If CB11 should provide testimony, then for which items and to which city council committee? What programs and services are funded in the executive budget, and how might these programs impact Community District 11? What information might be of interest to your respective committees? Again, it's a challenge to digest everything we just read. We just got this morning. We just got the budget 2 days ago. But I want the questions in our head, because I will be reaching out to you, your chairs, and I would like us to form up sooner than later, so we can go for the chair's approval on making sure we have the opportunity to advocate for any items that you guys are seeing that we need to. I see a lot of our requests are answered. Most of the things I see there is just personally, in my opinion, is just homework and advocacy. Members got to do the work. Drill the administrative agencies to get the answers. It's not going to happen in a day. I promise you. That's been not since I've been here. It's been in conversations, but it took years, and look where we're at. So I will turn over the next segment to. I don't see no questions or concerns or comments. Or better yet, I don't see the raise hand function. I'm gonna start simplifying. Sorry, guys. Review. I'll turn over to Carly for a review of the budget summary.
Okay. So I sent this out on Tuesday, and I'm gonna really very briefly move through it. It's the budget summary for the executive budget. I just wanted to talk about this because in this budget summary, as well as in his mayor's message, it's also on the OMB page, he kind of just gives an overview of the programs that he's prioritizing for fiscal year 2022. And I feel like not only is it important to know what programs and initiatives he's prioritizing, but it's also important to consider in relation to the budget responses that OMB provided that read, we're going to try to accommodate this request using different existing resources. And I feel like some of these programs that they're funding are, you know, like these are the existing resources that they're referring to. So this budget, again, this is not my presentation. This is the OMB presentation. So yeah, I'm just reading out my interpretation of it. But this budget prioritizes a recovery from, I guess, not a recovery from COVID, not just like the public health implications, but also the fiscal implications. So he titled it A Recovery for All. I'm going to skip this because I'm not advocating for his budget. I don't work for him specifically. But in this budget, he says that they prioritize investment in schools. They redefine summer school. The city cleanup corps is something I want to talk about. And then also some other community investments to stop gun violence. Let's see. Let's see, new investments include mental health crisis response. We do have a pilot in our district, fully universal 3K for all, expand early childhood special education, and then reimagine public space with Manhattan Greenway. This is related to the East River Esplanade funding. Let's see, he mentioned just some of so we were in a tough spot last year and now we're not in a tough spot. And this is his slide that explains that. They do mention that we have received the full funding for the school foundation aid. That's something that the Youth and Education Committee has advocated for. That's something that the full board has passed a letter numerous times requesting that these funds be released, and that in this budget it was released. So moving forward, let's see, 100,000 jobs were added, driven by the vaccination campaign and the federal stimulus. Okay, so I think this is current. This is just like the vaccine for all, 700 million towards that. I'm skipping this. Okay. So here's the actual numbers. So we have 100% fair student funding. 600 million is coming into our district from fiscal year 2022. We have 377 million for universal 3K for all. We have 500 million toward intensive academic recovery for every student. So I believe that this has something to do with, you know, like just students catching up because of COVID-19 and catching everyone up to speed. Information technology support, 155 million in fiscal year 2022. Hold schools harmless on mid-year adjustment, 130 million in fiscal year 2021. If anyone has further insight on what that is, that would be greatly appreciated. Let's see, so expansion of restorative justice for social emotional learning in middle and high schools, 12 million in fiscal year 2022. I'd be curious to see like the details of that. Like, what does that mean? What are these programs that expands that? Community schools in every district, 10 million toward that. They're gonna add about 150 community schools citywide. Oh, I missed one thing. The public schools athletic league is expanded by 6 million. That's sports programming. Special education services, 236 million. And expand early childhood special education by 22 million. So in considering, in reading all of these, about all of this funding, I'm curious to know how much of that is going to the district. Like, what are the programs that are being funded with this money, and how prevalent are these services in East Harlem? Summer Rising for up to 190,000 students this summer, 200 million in fiscal year 2022. And that is in addition to a total of 75,000 slots for the summer youth employment. And that is So it looks like this was fully restored to where it was pre-pandemic, because there were 75,000 spots in 2019. And that's something that that we requested, the full restoration of SYEP. That happened. 100 million for guaranteed healthcare, 50 million for the public health core. I'm pretty sure that's just building upon test and trace. New family home visits for receiving 23 million in funding. That includes health services to first-time parents in task force neighborhoods and for NYCHA residents. It's going to expand citywide next year. So for fiscal year 23. Let's see. Okay, so this is responding to the calls for transitioning responses to nonviolent mental health, people with mental health needs, to agencies that are not NYPD. So that's receiving 112 million in fiscal year 22. That's the pilot. We have a pilot in our district. Expand mobile treatment teams, 25 new teams to bring critical mental health services directly to New Yorkers, 23 million in fiscal year 22. Thrive neighborhood support is being funded 2.5 million, and that's crisis prevention support by peers and community organizations. Communities Thrive, 2 million. Looks like that's telemental health services. And the Behavioral Health Academy, that's 1 million. Train and support community mental health providers in areas hardest hit by the pandemic. Community care plan, support seniors living at home and in their communities. Open 25 more senior centers in underserved communities of color. Curious to know where those are going. Is East Harlem receiving any? Investments in senior centers. Let's see, the strengthen nonprofit. So provide financial stability for human services providers by increasing indirect rates. There's funding going toward emergency food distribution programs. Let's see what else. And then here's some small business funding. Giselle, you might be interested for the Eco Dev Committee and all of this. Let's see. So this, they spoke, so we requested this, and they're doing this citywide. I'm not saying it's because of our request, but I think it's important. I think previously we've only focused on our budget register and not enough on like the bigger picture. And I feel like it's important to look at the bigger picture and draw the connections to our budget. Okay, and he's really interested in bringing tourism back. So they're launching the largest tourism campaign in history, 25 million towards that. The city cleanup corps. So the city is directly hiring 10,000 New Yorkers to make the city cleaner and greener. They're investing $234 million in fiscal year 2022. And he's branding this as like a revival of the New Deal era policy. So I think this is really interesting. I do believe it's $15 per hour. And I am curious to know how they're going to do the outreach for this. I know that New York City Parks is responsible for the hiring. I think that this, I think that it kind of can work hand in hand with the SYEP and like the other programs we were requesting for our youth, because a lot of these jobs can be filled by youth in our district. And then here, restore the litter basket collection service, 9 million in fiscal year 2022. That was mentioned in our budget register. All right. So I don't know, Jason, do you want me to go through every single slide? I did send it. I'm not sure if everybody was able to look at it, but this is just an overview of the programs that the mayor is highlighting with his budget, and then he has another document, the mayor's message on the executive budget, and he kind of goes more into detail about that. And it also includes an analysis of agency, like funding for each agency. I think it's a lot of material, but I think it's worthwhile, especially if you're interested in understanding the budget process. I can continue reading, but I just don't know how useful it is for everybody. Giselle has her hand raised.
Sorry. Yeah, Giselle.
So this that you sent us, Carly, was like really helpful, because that's exactly the thought. I said, well, this addresses a lot of the stuff that was in the budget request. I think for the small biz part, we kind of already have those things. And like, I remember the commercial lease legal assistance. They're putting 5.2 million in that. But I mean, I remember I attended one of these, and like, I think they give you like the first 30 minutes for free. And then after that, you choose whether you want that lawyer or not. So where is the 5.2? I think it just raised a lot of more questions as to like you said, like, where's exactly the money going to? But I guess we're gonna have to find out, like, through the agencies and how much they got, which is also provided. That then with that information, we can go to the agency and be like, you guys got this much for this. So, but it was really helpful. I was excited about the mobile treatment teams. So hopefully we see those in our district. And that's it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I guess I'll just finish. I'll finish, but that it's like those sorts of questions that you have, Giselle, that I think are really useful and will be handy in our district budget consultation, or even borough budget consultation, because I'm sure other community boards have the same questions, like this impact. So,
And if I may interject real quick, Carly, I think at the end of this slideshow, they have a place where we can send questions. So Giselle, if you already got a question, that'd be great. Maybe we can send some questions early on. I think it's separate from the whole budget process, but we'll look at it.
okay. Yeah. All right. So reimagining our streets, they're really running with the Open Streets program, between the open restaurants, open streets. It seems like it's not something that's going away. There's also funding for cameras, speed cameras, bike lanes. And here the public safety funding. Expanding CCRB, community-based hate crime prevention. And it looks like neighborhood patrols, bystander intervention training, provide victim services. Cure violence, that workforce is going to be tripled by next summer. Mentors for at-risk youth. Saturday Night Lights, that's a District Attorney of New York, that's their program. Joint Force to End Gun Violence, 1.3 million in fiscal year 2022. I wonder what that looks like. Yeah, so this is a $98.6 billion budget. It's a lot of money. And I am not gonna get into all of this because this is, really detailed.
That's the fun stuff. Thank you, Carly, so much for that. I think that you gave us a lot of information to digest along there with from the mayor's office, right? That's the idea, right? Is to connect the dots. I know a lot of us always have that question, and the beauty of sometimes some of that confusion is that it keeps the work front and center, and it's up to us to keep to doing the work. If you could scroll to the end real quick, I don't know if there's that like contact card, but I do remember something saying that they're taking questions or taking some, and it may not be here now that I'm thinking about it. No, the last 2 pages were money. There was somewhere that I read when this came to us, and I'll get that. So that way, Giselle, you send your question. If you put it out, that'd be great. And then, yeah, Carl, I agree with you. There's a few items there that I question, how they're going to do it. And then I always have the greatest question: how much of this is going to our district, right? What percentages of these items? And that's up to us to do the analysis. So then that way, when we find, the confusion, or for lack of a better word, the hypocrisy, we can properly advocate for it. So thank you, Carly, for bringing this to our attention. I definitely found this helpful. Very, very helpful. So the next segment of the agenda, I'm sorry, are there any questions outside of what Giselle brought up particular today? Was there any questions, comments?
Jason has his hand raised.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so just to take a step back from all of the kind of the budget register and also the budget summary, because it doesn't fully flesh out everything in the budget. It gives us a picture of what the mayor's office wants us to see and what they want us to respond to, but it is not the full picture. And so if you look at the which document is this? It's the summary of expense budget by agency. I think it's the expense revenue contract budget. It shows, I just lost my place, but it shows how much the NYPD got last year and what's proposed for this year. And the city is actually proposing an increase in the NYPD budget. If I'm reading it correctly, they're proposing an increase by millions of dollars. And that's important because last year we, as a community board, we adopted a resolution calling for defunding the NYPD by, I think, over $1 million or over $1 billion. Which, as we later found out, the city never actually did that. They just moved the money around and continued to channel funds from other agencies back into the NYPD. And so I just want to be very clear about that. This year, not only is there not a reduction based on the very clear message that we sent to City Council and the mayor's office last year, they're increasing the NYPD's budget. And why is that important? Because as we went through the budget register earlier, many of these agencies are saying that, these requests are subject to the current budget funds that are available. Well, if the funds aren't available, that's basically saying your request is denied. And so I think that if there's money to increase the NYPD budget, why is that money not going back into other agencies? And so, noted earlier regarding sanitation, well, there's been a pandemic, so maybe some of the sanitation issues are not as bad at the current moment because there's less people out on the streets. When the city opens up in the summer and there's more trash, people are out again, what is that going to look like? So we need services, we need our agencies to be funded. We're talking about NYPD having billions of dollars increased in their budget over the past 10 years. The 5.2 or $5.4 billion currently allocated doesn't even account for all of the other monies that are put towards policing, including settlements for lawsuits, pension, retirement, all that other stuff, which actually adds up to more than $11 billion a year for policing. So I just wanted to flag that piece of it, because I think if we're going to actually respond to the city at the hearings, I think we need to put that on the table.
Thank you, Jason. Andrew.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Sorry, I was trying to get my mic on. So I want to second the concern brought up by Jason. We sent a very clear message from our committee and our community board for defunding of the NYPD by at least 1 billion. We had the comptroller's office come in and share the proposal they supported for around 250 million. We also had a local CBO come in and explain why they had joined with these demands for defund NYPD and what specifically they wanted those funds to be invested in. I think the mayor's budget right now, from what we are seeing, doesn't look nearly as bad as what we thought or what we were really on the precipice of earlier in the year. But I think that, and I'm going to send the Politico article on this, a lot of that is because of the federal stimulus, right? I mean, we had Chuck Schumer come and talk to our community board and say, essentially, if you don't have the money, it's not the Fed's fault. That's a state and a city problem. But that's because we've got this one-time influx. And so just some of the early criticism on this budget has been that as of right now, you have in this budget a lot of one-time federal dollars being used to fund reoccurring program costs. I haven't had the time to break down the extent to which that affects East Harlem. We're obviously just looking at this stuff this week, but de Blasio's budget is projecting budget gaps of around 4 billion in each of the next fiscal years, starting in 2023. And so that's something that's going to be left on de Blasio's leaving. This is it. He's out the door. This is what's going to be left on the doorstep of the new administration, whoever they are. And so I think that there's some folks who, I mean, a lot of us look at this budget and obviously it's not as bad as it could have been, but a lot of programs, and I think it would behoove our committee to try and understand what programs in our neighborhood are only being filled with those one-time payments. And I think the fact that so much of this budget is actually on a cliff in the next few years and dependent on whatever happens in DC. I don't know if we get another stimulus here, right? I don't know if the partisan politics of DC allows for that. And I don't know what the city's recovery looks like. We don't know how bad COVID gets. I think it's really important that if our committee and our community board identified a specific way to make cuts, and has already called for that we definitely, make another call for that and maybe bring in folks who are involved in that campaign this year, maybe bring them into our next meeting so that they can explain what kind of, what specifically are we talking about when we say that money, and really understand why it's so important. Because again, this budget really is kicking the can down the road to the budget that we're already, in terms of trying to be proactive, we're already trying to think about how we're going to address that, right? We're here thinking about, okay, well, what are we going to do for the next battle? Well, the next battle is going to be that we're at a $4 billion cliff. That's what's up for 2023. So I just want to second what Jason said. I was unaware that this is actually raising the budget for the NYPD. I just knew that our call to cut was not being heard. That's new information to me. So I just wanted to second that and again, impress upon us whether it's that or some other way that our committee starts thinking about where we want to see cuts. Because if we are looking at a $4 billion cliff next year, you better believe that the first thought for cuts is going to be communities like ours.
Thank you, Andrew. Xavier.
Thank you for the comments, committee members. I think it would be crucial to our success that each of these budget items be taken back to committee for full vetting and then an analysis to be delivered prior to giving any kind of testimony. We should constantly, as we have positions that may have been enshrined from 10 years ago, we're constantly reassessing. I think it's important as part of our collaborative and integrative process to make sure that we're checking of the committees where these requests are helmed. As was mentioned earlier with housing, for example, these issues that were highlighted earlier before we got into this section will be addressed during the housing committee. I will raise them personally. I think also too, we should be looking deeper and not just continue to look at one section of the budget, but looking at all sections so that when we meet in our separate committees, we'll be able to carry that information forward and guide the conversation. because there are other positions we have taken and enshrined in resolutions, and when it comes to budgeting and appropriations, that should be taken under consideration. So I just want to make sure that we're being holistic in our approach and making sure that the committees are fully engaged, and where these requests have germinated from. So, the seeds planted and they're germinating and they're flowering. So we have to keep that in mind as well. So that is my main comment. I will look forward to carrying this to housing and then human services. And I think John Green also, he sits on the committee, and we have a couple other members who sit on human services as well. So Stephanie and I think Jennifer is on there. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope you're all staying safe. And also one other comment about the budget trends and expectations. Again, these are this one-time infusion. There is also room that is open for us to have a secondary if need be, depending on how things manage. Also, if you saw the economy is headed up and its growth, I think, was 6.2%. That is something to keep in mind. Again, as we start to return to work and more people get vaccinated, there are a lot of unknowns as we navigate and going into not just this fiscal year, but the next. So again, I think we're looking at a quarter-to-quarter basis as the economies tend to evolve. So I think we just have to make sure that we're checking in at all times with our committees and as we approach and respond to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. Any other questions or comments?
Looks like Jason and Andrew both have their hands raised again.
Who was first?
Jason, you can go for it.
I just wanted to share that I dropped in a chat the link for our resolution last year where and this is a quote, Community Board 11 upholds that the full $1.1 billion reduction can and should be implemented over fiscal year 2021. So I think if that is the precedent that we want to stay true to, then I think we should also be thinking about issuing a resolution to not only take down the 1.1 billion from last year that was never cut, but also to make sure that that additional proposed amount of the increase is also accounted for.
Andrew.
Yeah, well, I want to second what Jason said, and then also note that in terms of defund at NYPD last year, we did have the comptroller's support in that, but we also know that mayoral candidates are all being asked to weigh in. And as of now, I believe, and Jason can correct me if I'm wrong, the candidate who has actually gone above what our community board pledged was Diana Morales. She's the first Afro-Boricua running for mayor in New York. I'm not on her campaign. I've not endorsed anyone, but I just want to note that she is one of the front runners in this race, and she's calling for $3 billion, which is far above what our committee has called for or our community board has called for. But I just wanted to just put some context there in terms of where our last request was, kind of contrasted with where some of the dialogue is now. And yeah, Jason updating in the chat there that Sean Donovan is talking about 250, which 250 million in cut, which aligns with the comptroller's office from last year. So yeah, I think just since we're on this, I really do think that for next meeting, if we can, we should bring in a CBO that has been engaged with this to kind of give us a better idea as to what those cuts would look like and kind of update our request this way. You know, we're staying in line with what folks are calling for, but then we're also, you know, following up and doing advocacy on what our committee has requested.
Thank you, Andrew. Definitely something to have a conversation with the committee that handles public safety in our district. But I will look into this and see what would be the proper process moving forward.
Well, so specifically, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to talk out of turn.
No, it's okay. I mean, because you know, I'm looking at the letter and I understand what we did. And yeah, Jason, you're right. Great point. We wrote a letter of support for a process, and nothing's happened for a year. Or has something happened? Because now all these mayors candidates are running. Again, this is definitely something where a conversation has to happen at the other committee levels for us to, you know, resolve something that we are chiming as a concern. So you guys, you work on the specifics, and I'm more than entertain the resolution. You know, we've done it before. Andrew, you want to finish? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, it was just specifically to request that we just as a committee invite the CBO or representative from the CBO that we had come in last year to talk about this. It was really informative, and the comptroller's office was helpful. I'm forgetting the name of the person that we brought in off the top of my head, but I know that she was really helpful in helping us understand the contours of this debate and how it would affect the budget. So I'm just specifically requesting that we as a committee try and get that person in, or someone from that committee, that campaign in for our next meeting.
Definitely something that we can entertain.
Thank you.
John.
Good evening, everybody. Since Andrew brought up the campaign for mayor, the thing is that what I'm about to say is that perhaps for fiscal year 23 budget, the thing is we have no idea. We will most likely give our request to one group of people, and by the time January comes around next year, there may be a new group because there'll most likely be new commissioners. There will be a new mayor, new budget, new borough president, new controller, and about 30 members of the city council. So the thing is that means our request going to be going before a whole new group of people. So the thing is that advocacy will probably be a thing that will be an absolute must next year for next year's budget. And the thing is, as since we all have our liaisons for the committees on the board, the thing is that that's something that we should remind them of within the next couple of months.
Thank you, John. Thank you all.
I have my hand up.
Oh, I can't see it, Jason. For some reason, your picture does not show you. Oh, it does. That.
Thanks. My hand is blending with the color of my wall. So I just wanted to read into the record because I put in the chat that it's not controversial to reallocate NYPD funds. And it's absolutely outrageous to increase it. I think we should update our defund resolution from last year to account for the new numbers. And I wanted to provide a little additional context. The NYPD blew past their overtime budget this year, beating people up all of last year through this year at Black Lives Matter protests. We absolutely should not be paying for this with our taxpayer dollars. It's absolutely outrageous. At the current pace, total spending on police overtime will equal $405 million for the fiscal year ending June 30th. This is 60% more than what the mayor had promised last year. So they blew past the budget for overtime, beating people up all of last year at protests. So I think that it is absolutely within our right, and it's completely reasonable to update our defund resolution from last year and to demand a reduction in their budget.
Thank you, Jason.
Giselle has her hand raised.
Giselle.
I have a question. Is there a way that we can find out just to understand like why certain things why our support letters sometimes mean something, sometimes don't? Is there a way to see how many other community boards, or if we were the only community board that sent a support letter to defund the police? And then my second part to that question is, would it help to bring other community board members to our district needs budget to see like what other people's opinions are in other community boards? Because I think I remember Ben Kalo saying that we were the only community board that sent a support letter to defund the police.
Great questions, Giselle. I will leave that to, if you would like to answer that question, Carly, about is there a way to coordinate our resolutions and or letter of supports with other boards within the borough and or city?
I'm not sure I have a answer to it, but just as we publish our letters, other community boards should be at the very least, if not have to be, publishing their letters. I do see that people raise their hands following your questions, so I'm not sure if they have answers. Stephanie and Andrew have their hands raised.
Stephanie, then Andrew.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I do know that we have like a borough board meeting where our chair and sometimes the vice chair will be present. I don't know if that still goes on because of COVID. It must be like, but if we know of like, and I've seen this happen before, if we know of like a certain issue or something that we want to conjoin other community boards, I've seen it being done, like the coordination of that being done at the borough board meeting. But outside of that, I'm not sure. I don't know if maybe committees meet like that. That actually would be a great idea. But also I would urge that we keep in mind that there's a reason why there's a bunch of different community boards. There's a reason why districts are separated, right? There are different communities and different communities have different needs. And just because another community board may not have the same urgencies that we have, or we may not have the same urgencies that another community board area has, that we have, or that they have, or, whatever. It doesn't mean that those things shouldn't be advocated for and pushed forward for. And I do believe that in this community, the community board 11, a lot of community, it is a very contentious conversation when it comes to police reform, but, and we may not all be on the same playing field on this, but I do believe that we need to keep continuing to have that conversation. And that's it. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie. Andrew.
I wanted to mention that was I wanted to say that was a fantastic question about, is there a way that we can kind of coordinate with other community boards? I'm not sure there's a streamlined way to do it, but I do think we should look into it, because maybe, loop in Angel on just how that's maybe worked in the past or ways we can try that. And I say that because actually, so we were, we might have been the only Manhattan community board to do that, but we certainly weren't the only community board in New York City. And so once it came out that we did it in Manhattan, there was actually a reporter. Is she from the city? Might be from the city. She asked like, oh, have other community boards did this? And then a couple community boards from the Bronx started chiming in. Like, so this is something that we may have been alone in Manhattan, but we certainly weren't citywide, but there was no coordination as to what folks were doing. And so the requests were different. And so part of that is, as was mentioned, districts are different, district needs are different. That's why we have separate districts. But part of it was, I mean, there was a clear citywide call. But because there wasn't good coordination between community boards, the call came out muddled in a number of different ways that I don't think were necessarily about some of it was about what was going on local, but part of it just was there wasn't like that level of coordination. And so I think that's something to definitely be attentive to. And, whether we're talking about defund NYPD or we're talking about any of our other requests, I think that's really valid to see if there are ways, because obviously if multiple community boards are chiming in on an issue, it's going to get more attention than one.
Thank you, Andrew. Xavier.
Hi, thank you. And just in the interest of time, to answer the question from or the statement from Stephanie, yes, we do it. Borough Board has been going on. It is public. The schedule is posted on when Borough Board meets. Oftentimes, positions of the board are read into the record during Borough Board. There's what you could call the highlight reel where we hit all the major points. So yes, that is raised. There is varied opinions with this issue. Stephanie is correct. We have to continue having that conversation. It is crucial that we do because having since day one of the pandemic, having been out there, there are still issues being raised both this, and I think it does run along a generational line as well. Having listened to a lot of our elders in the community, I implore everyone to be engaged as much as you safely can do. And that we take this back. I think anything, and it would behoove all of us that this be, if any other updates or adaptations of this resolution, it would ideally be helmed at Public Safety and Transportation as they respond to the budget. That is my recommendation. I think that is where it should be helmed. So that is, and then you can have the conversation with those members who are most focused on those issues. And then it can revert back to us to where we can have a second set of eyes on it, as well as the executive committee. To the further extent, I think also too, I'm going to ask everyone, please look at the entire register because there are areas where I don't want to use the saying like we have had an inequitable treatment, but we have for decades. And I want you to look at things, whether it's the sanitation, look at housing. These are broader stroke issues. So I don't want us to be fixated on just one. We can chew gum and walk at the same time on this. And I appreciate everyone's level best efforts and focus. Thank you to everyone in this great conversation. I think we're having more dialogue than we have in the past. Thank you, Jason, for letting us yammer on, as they say, and appreciate all of you and all of your efforts. And I admire all of you and I look forward to continuing the work. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm a firm believer in discussion, open forum. If
You and I both, brother.
everybody doesn't have an opportunity to share their ideas, it makes it real hard for us to figure out an action plan. That's what you were talking about. How do we act? What's the next steps? What's our process? What's the plan? And we know what we have to do. The question is, how do we do it? And the reality is, as I always say, do the homework and you will find the answer. But it seems like it's already been done. Jason pretty much laid it on the table. Now the administration and or more importantly, the follow-up with respect to our other committees needs to be done, and more importantly, ensure that conversation is happening. So thank you all for your comments as it relates to that presentation. Carl, if you want to go to the next item on the agenda, the review of city council and the public hearing calendar. And I mean, it's real simple. These are the next calendar meetings that are coming up. We heard, I think the biggest issue that was brought up wasn't necessarily, for what I heard all day from the last hour, 2 or 3 hours, is not a complaint of what we are not getting as opposed to a decrease of what the other agencies are getting. So we definitely know that there's some concerns there with public safety that's been brought up. Housing was one of the other items, and business services. So this is your list. I mean, Carly handed it out. Sent it out. I think pretty much if there isn't a really pressing issue for advocacy, then, in the sense of you going, us having somebody provide written and or personally testify that, and you focus for the district consultations. But if there are items where you're concerned about advocacy, like that were just brought up, these are the great places to have to further push that agenda, so we ensure that our elected officials hear it as well, and it gets recorded for them. So Thank you, Carly. Just wanted to give you guys an idea of what the list looks like. We looked at it back again, I think in March. And that was for the budget, for the executive budget. This will be for what's considered, and I don't know the technical term, I think it's called the adopted budget. So from now until June, there will be one more, lack of a better word, deliberation between the city council and the mayor for them to finalize the budget. One of our council members, as you know, is on the budget committee. So it assists us to make sure that whatever claims or concerns we have regarding the budget, that we act fast. So there was some brought up today. You all know how to do the letter of support and the resolution process, especially for the people that have brought it up, and just let's get the process going formally, so that way we can do it right. I don't really have too much else on the meetings. I do think this is something, you guys had a lot of information posted on you today. You have a lot of work and literally a little bit of time. You have 2 weeks. So I tell you to focus on your committee. I tell you to focus on your advocacy. And more importantly, I'm going to tell you to focus on how for us to act. So let's use the tools that we have available to us to properly act on our next steps. So speaking of next steps, thank you. You have all this information, digest it. My first directive to you is contact your chair. Go over it before you meet at committee. Have a conversation, have a discussion, look at, is there anything on that, are there any items that have been responded to that either bring up concern, or more importantly, that you're looking toward, or that the committee that you've already assessed over the last year as a, that the committee wants to further respond to. And again, this is the opportunities you made. I did not see much last month. I saw a lot, I heard a lot, I didn't see it. So, I'll reach out to some people to see what happened with the city council public hearings last month. And that's what I have for the next steps. We're going to talk about next steps for the committee when we send out the agenda for next month's committee meeting. But pretty much we want to get into a position where we could advocate if the need calls for it, obviously the district need, and more importantly, if there's any issues with the budget, especially with inequity, right? We talked a lot about that at length last June, and maybe that's another opportunity. So, do you have anything else, Carly, on next steps? I don't.
No, it's really up for the committees to decide, and for the budget liaisons to decide if they want to pursue something at the city council public hearing.
Thank you. I agree. And if you don't, you have district council. If something isn't black, and again, it's just like with writing resolutions, they have to be bulletproof. If you don't have a bulletproof testimony or bulletproof advocacy, then focus on the district consultations for your Q&A, which is your questions and answers, or for lack of a better word, RFI, requesting information from the administrative agency. So that's it. It's the longest meeting I've ever done in my life.
Jason, I have my hand raised.
Oh, sorry, Xavier.
Oh, I know. I'm going to have something else to talk to the therapist about. Little joke, very little. Just a quick reminder, again, when giving testimony, having done it in both the showing up down there to be there at City Hall to give testimony, and with the virtual, there are two things to keep in mind. You can sign up to be to represent the board, but you must represent the board's permission. The recommendation is to make sure it's pretty clear with the chair of that committee and the chair of the board. The DM will definitely double check that. If you want to give permission, testimony as a neighborhood resident or community resident, you have to sign up separately with that. You can't conflate the two during the hearing. Those two have to be cut apart. So just keeping that in mind, and it has to be on positions that the board has taken. So that's, again, that's just a quick reminder so that going forward, we dot our I's and cross our T's. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. You have another question, Xavier?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Next. Any old business? Our entire meeting is old business. Next. New business. I already wrote your comment, Jason, earlier about a proposed resolution modifying last year's resolution. So it'll definitely been in the minutes. Any other new business? Next.
I have to do the second roll call.
Not a problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. Arroyo?
Yes.
Green?
Here.
Malave?
Here.
Meyer?
Here.
Padilla?
Been here.
Santiago?
Present.
Villanueva?
Present.
And Wu?
Still here.
Okay, great. You're all here.
I'm sorry. Meeting's adjourned, 8:47 p.m.
Good night. Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
wonderful night.
Hey, good
Good
night, everybody.
night. Thanks, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.